What is the nature of the mind? What is called mind is a wondrous power residing in the self. It causes all thoughts to arise. Apart from thoughts, there is no such thing as mind. Therefore, thought is the nature of the mind. Apart from thoughts, there is no independent entity called the world. In deep sleep, there are no thoughts and there is no world. In the states of waking and dream, there are thoughts and there is a world also. Just as a spider emits the thread of the web out of itself and again withdraws it into itself, likewise the mind projects the world out of itself and again resolves it into itself. When the mind comes out of the self, the world appears. Therefore, when the world appears to be real, the self does not reveal. And when the self appears, shine forth, the world does not appear. When one persistently inquires into the nature of the mind will end leaving the self as the residue. And what is referred to as the self is the source, silence. The mind always exists only in dependence on something gross. It cannot stay alone. It is the mind that is called the subtle body or the soul. Let's expand on that a little. From the beginning, what is called mind is a wondrous power residing in the self. It points that the thoughts appear and disappear within the silence within. The silence is the substratum of every thought and will distinguish the I thought from all the rest of the thought, because the I thought is the first one to arise and it's the last one to subside. So when the I thought appears, then the other thoughts follow. And when the I thought disappears, all the thought disappear as well, and what remains is the silence within. It causes all thoughts to arise. What causes all thoughts to arise is the mind. Apart from thoughts, there is no such thing as mind. So the content of the mind is thoughts, and all the thoughts are the same, empty and not real. The most important thought is the I thought. Therefore, thought is the nature of the mind. Apart from thoughts, there is no independent entity called the world. This is pointing that the world is not independent. It is dependent on thoughts to appear and disappear. So when there is no thought, there is no world. One of the things that are important is not to be occupied if the world is real or unreal. Focus and examine all the attention, all the energy on the thoughts themselves. Examine if the thoughts are real or unreal. If the thoughts are who you truly are, or who you truly are is silent awareness, which is always aware whether there is thought or there is no thought. It is existence, consciousness, bliss. So it is pointing that apart from thought, there is no independent entity called world. Most people think that the world exists by itself. And here he continues, in deep sleep there are no thoughts and there is no world. We can see in 3 places when there are no thoughts, there is no world. One is deep sleep, dreamless state. The other is in samadhi, means the thought disappear, dissolve into the source, and all that remains is silence. And the other is in shock, or when you faint and you don't have any thought, the whole world disappears. This might be an experience of everyone, whether it's in deep sleep, they lose the world every night, or during the day if they fall asleep deeply, or when they faint or fainted in the past. In the states of waking and dream there are thoughts, and there is a world also. So the world appears to begin is when you wake up in the morning, or when the I thought appear, or the external world that we call actually disappears in dream, and still we experience that there is a subtle world in the dream. Just as the spider emits the thread of the web out of itself and again withdraws it into itself, likewise the mind projects the world out of itself and again resolves it into itself. Here it is pointing how the mind is projecting the world. So when the I appears, the I thought, space, time begins and the whole universe begins. So the I appears, it thinks it is a physical body inside the world, which is not accurate, because the body is just a conceptual image or mental image in the mind, and the mind itself appears and disappears within the silence within. This is where he started in the beginning, that what is called mind is a wondrous power residing in the self. So the thoughts reside within who I truly am. The thoughts reside in the silence within. The thoughts don't appear in the body. The body appears as a mental image in the mind. And the mind appears and disappears within the silence. And when there is no thought, all that is silence. When the mind comes out of the self, the world appears. Therefore, when the world appears to be real, the self does not reveal. When the thoughts appear to be real, I identify with the thoughts, I get attached to them because I think it is the reality, and that veils and covers the source itself. So when the mind comes out of the self, the world appears, and therefore when the world appears to be real, or the thoughts appear to be real, the self does not shine forth. And when the self reveals, shine, the world does not appear. Because when the self reveals itself into itself, because it is the only thing that is vibrant and alive, the thought just disappear, or they have no substance, they are empty, just like bubbles, empty or transparent, or there is a stillness of the mind, and all there is silence, which is actually everyone's natural state. It's effortless to experience the silence within. All the effort is required to remove what I'm not, the false misidentification with the thoughts. When one persistently inquires into the nature of the mind will end leaving the self as the residue. When you examine your thoughts, which are not even yours, and when you examine the beliefs, the concepts, the ideas, the desires, the fears, you start to realize that they are empty, phantom images, unreal. and they lose the power because you stop getting attached to what is not real. And when the mind is still, then what remains as a residue is the self, the source itself. And examining can be in many different ways. I won't mention it right now. There can be inquiry into the self, there can be discrimination, there can be examining your concepts or beliefs. What is referred to as the self is the silence, the source. The mind always exists only in dependence on something gross. Here it is pointing that in order for the ego or the mind that identifies with the body to appears, to continue to appear real and to exist, it's because it thinks and believes it is a physical object. So the moment the I thought thinks and believes that it is a physical body, it gets attached to thoughts about the body, and it would continue to exist because it is deluded by the idea that it is an object, and then it starts to seek the objects of the world. The mind always exists only in dependence on something gross. It cannot stay alone. When you start to see that the thought is not an object, and you examine the thoughts themselves, they disappear. And what remains as a residue is who you truly are, the self. It is the mind that is called the subtle body, or the soul. The mind is subtle. Subtle are thoughts that cannot be perceived through the senses, and gross are objects that can be perceived through the senses. So one would discriminate between objects and thoughts. And then obviously who you truly are is beyond thoughts and objects. Actually, we can see also we have three states we undergo: waking state, dreaming state, and deep sleep state. In the waking state is the gross body, because we perceive the physical body. In the dreaming state is the subtle body, which is only thoughts, and it appears to be like an object in the dream, because it is made from names and forms. And in deep sleep state, it's the causal body. It is in the seed-like form that every time when the I arises, it manifests again. The subtle body and the gross body as well. Thank you very much. Countless blessings.